Saddam Hussein's story begins in a small village near Tikrit, Iraq on April 28, 1937. He was born into a family of shepherds in Al-Awya, a place far from the centers of power he would one day dominate. His life started with loss. His father, Hussein Abd al-Majid, passed away before he was even born. This left his mother, Suba Tulfa al-Musalat, to raise him alone for a short time. She soon remarried, and Saddam grew up in a household with a stepfather who was reportedly abusive. These early years were marked by hardship and instability, which undoubtedly shaped the man he would become in the decades that followed. At the young age of 3, Saddam was sent away to live with his maternal uncle Khairallah Talfa in the bustling city of Baghdad. This move was a pivotal moment in his young life. His uncle was a stark contrast to his rural origins. He was an Iraqi army officer and a passionate Arab nationalist. He held strong beliefs about pan-Arab unity and the supremacy of the Sunni branch of Islam. Talfa became a powerful father figure to Saddam, teaching him his political and ideological views. The lessons Saddam learned in his uncle's home laid the foundation for his future political ambitions and his worldview. The stability Saddam found with his uncle was short-lived. In 1941, Khairallah Talfa participated in a failed coup against the British-supported monarchy that ruled Iraq at the time. For his role in the uprising, his uncle was arrested and sent to prison. This forced Saddam, then just a young boy, to return to his mother's village and the difficult home life he had left behind. For several years he was back under the care of his stepfather, an experience that many historians believe deepened his sense of resentment and hardened his character, teaching him lessons of survival and toughness. Finally, at the age of 10, Saddam decided to take his future into his own hands. In 1947, he fled his village and made his way back to Baghdad, seeking out his uncle who had recently been released from prison. This time his uncle made sure Saddam received a formal education, enrolling him in school for the first time. The young Saddam was ambitious and dreamed of a military career, hoping to join the prestigious military academy in Baghdad. However, he was unable to pass the difficult entrance exams. This failure closed one door but pushed him toward another, setting him on a path into the world of revolutionary politics. After his hopes of a military career were dashed, Saddam Hussein needed to find a new path for his ambition. He briefly attended the College of Law at the University of Baghdad, but his true passion lay elsewhere. In 1955, at the age of 18, he made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He dropped out of his studies and officially joined the Baath Party. This was not just a political organization, it was a pan-Arab socialist movement that aimed to unite the Arab world and free it from foreign influence. Saddam's dedication and ruthless nature allowed him to quickly make a name for himself within the party's ranks. The political landscape of Iraq was highly volatile during this period. In 1958, a group of military officers overthrew the monarchy that had ruled the country for decades, establishing the Republic of Iraq. The new leader, Prime Minister Abd al-Karim Qasim, began to align himself more closely with the Soviet Union. This move troubled both the Baath Party and Western powers like the United States. They saw Qasim as a threat, and a secret alliance began to form with the shared goal of removing him from power. Saddam, now a committed Ba'athist activist, found himself at the center of this dangerous political intrigue. Saddam's commitment to the Ba'athist cause was soon put to the ultimate test. On October 7, 1959, the party decided to take direct action against Prime Minister Qasim. A 22-year-old Saddam Hussein was chosen to be part of a 6-man assassination team tasked with killing the Prime Minister on a street in Baghdad. The attempt was a chaotic failure. Qasim was wounded in the attack, but he survived. Saddam himself was shot in the leg during the firefight. The failed plot instantly turned him into one of the most wanted men in all of Iraq, forcing him to go on the run to save his life. Forced into hiding, Saddam first escaped to a farm before the Baath Party orchestrated a more permanent escape plan for him. With assistance from sympathizers, he was smuggled out of Iraq, first to neighboring Syria and then to Egypt. In Cairo, he was granted political asylum and became a key figure for the Baath Party in exile. He continued his political work, networking with other exiled leaders, and strengthening his position within the party. His role in the assassination attempt, though a failure, had elevated his status from a simple member to a hardened revolutionary, known for his willingness to risk everything for the cause. While Saddam Hussein was living in exile in Egypt, the political situation back in Iraq remained turbulent. The Baath Party, though weakened after the failed assassination attempt, had not given up on its goal of seizing power. In February 1963 they finally succeeded. With support from factions within the army, the Baathists staged a violent coup known as the Ramadan Revolution. Prime Minister Qasim was captured and executed, and the Baath Party took control of the government. Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr, a senior Baathist and a relative of Saddam, became the new prime minister. This event allowed Saddam to finally return home. Upon his return to Iraq, Saddam was no longer a low-level operative. His reputation had grown, and he was rewarded for his loyalty and daring. He was appointed to a crucial position as the head of the party's intelligence and security apparatus. In this role, he was responsible for interrogating political opponents and purging threats to the new regime. It was here that Saddam began to build his power base, using fear and intimidation to ensure loyalty. He learned how to operate in the shadows, creating networks of spies and enforcers that would become the foundation of his future rule. He was building a state within a state. However, the Baath Party's grip on power was not secure. Just months after taking over, in November 1963, internal divisions and power struggles led to another coup. President Abdul Salam Arif, who had been an ally, turned against the Baathists, removing them from government. Many party leaders, including Prime Minister al-Bakr, were arrested. Saddam Hussein was also captured and thrown into prison. It seemed as though his revolutionary career had come to an abrupt and unsuccessful end. But even behind bars, Saddam remained a defiant and influential figure, plotting his next move and waiting for his opportunity. Saddam's time in prison did not break his spirit. In July 1966, he managed to escape, a feat that further enhanced his legendary status within the Baath Party. Once free, he immediately went to work rebuilding the fractured organization. He became the de facto leader of the party inside Iraq, working closely with the exiled al-Bakr. Together, they meticulously planned their return to power. On July 17, 1968, they executed a swift and bloodless coup, ousting the government and bringing the Baath Party back into control for good. Al-Bakr became president, and he appointed Saddam Hussein as his deputy, officially making him the vice president of Iraq. As vice president, Saddam Hussein was not content to simply be the second in command. While President Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr was the public face of the regime, Saddam worked tirelessly behind the scenes to become the true center of power in Iraq. He understood that real control came from mastering the country's security and intelligence forces. He established a vast and ruthless intelligence network known as the Mukhabarat to monitor the population and eliminate any hint of opposition. He placed his most trusted relatives and allies from his hometown of Tikrit in key positions, ensuring that loyalty was directed to him personally, not just to the party or the state. One of Saddam's most significant moves came on June 1, 1972. In a bold act of economic nationalism, he nationalized Iraq's massive oil industry. For decades, the country's most valuable resource had been controlled by a consortium of foreign companies from Britain, France, and the United States. By seizing control of the oil fields, Saddam put Iraq's immense wealth directly into the hands of his government. This decision was incredibly popular among the Iraqi people and dramatically increased the state's revenue. With this new financial power, he funded social programs, modernized infrastructure, and most importantly, expanded his military and security apparatus. Over the next several years, President al-Bakr's health began to fail, and his influence waned. Saddam, as his deputy, gradually took over more of the day-to-day responsibilities of governing the country, effectively running Iraq in all but name. He was the unquestioned strongman, the final authority on all major decisions. By 1979, he decided it was time to formalize his absolute power. On July 16, 1979, he pressured the aging al-Bakr to resign from the presidency, citing health reasons. Saddam Hussein then officially assumed the titles of President of Iraq and Chairman of the Revolutionary Command Council. Just days after becoming president, Saddam orchestrated a chilling event to solidify his control and send a clear message to anyone who might challenge him. On July 22, 1979, he gathered hundreds of senior Baath Party officials in a large hall. In a televised spectacle, he claimed to have uncovered a conspiracy against his new government. A terrified man was brought on stage to confess to the plot, and then read out a list of 68 alleged co-conspirators who were sitting in the audience. As their names were called, they were arrested and dragged from the hall. 22 of them were later executed. This brutal purge eliminated any potential rivals and established a reign of terror that would define his rule. Soon after Saddam Hussein consolidated his power, a major threat, emerged from his neighbor Iran. In 1979, the Iranian Revolution had actually overthrown the Shah and brought a radical Shia cleric Ayatollah Khomeini to power. As a Sunni Muslim leading a country with a Shia majority, Saddam feared that Khomeini's revolutionary ideas would spread to Iraq and inspire his own people to rise up against the Ba'athist government. Tensions between the two nations escalated quickly, fueled by border disputes, political rivalry, and honestly, some pretty deep-seated religious differences. Khomeini openly called for the overthrow of Saddam's secular regime, which Saddam saw as a direct threat to his survival. Confident in his military strength and expecting a swift victory, Saddam made a fateful decision. On September 22, 1980, he launched a full-scale invasion of Iran. His primary goal was to seize control of the disputed Shatt al-Arab waterway, a vital channel for oil exports, and to cripple the new Iranian government before it could become a regional power. He believed the Iranian military, weakened by the revolution, would collapse quickly. However, Saddam gravely underestimated the resolve of the Iranian people, who rallied behind their new leaders to defend their homeland with fierce determination. What Saddam had planned as a short, decisive war spiraled into a brutal and bloody conflict that would last for 8 long years. The Iran-Iraq War became a horrific war of attrition, with trench warfare, human wave attacks, and staggering casualties on both sides, reminiscent of World War I. The international community largely sided with Iraq, fearing the spread of Iran's Islamic Revolution more than Saddam's aggression. The United States, the Soviet Union, and many Arab nations provided Iraq with weapons, financial loans, and critical intelligence to prevent an Iranian victory, effectively propping up Saddam's war effort. During the war, Saddam's regime resorted to increasingly desperate and barbaric tactics. He authorized the use of chemical weapons against both Iranian soldiers and his own people. The most infamous of these attacks occurred on March 16, 1988. On that day, Iraqi forces dropped poison gas on the Kurdish town of Halabja in northern Iraq, which had been accused of sympathizing with Iran. Thousands of civilians, including women and children, were killed in the horrific attack. The war finally ended in a stalemate on August 20, 1988, with a UN-brokered ceasefire. Nothing had been gained, and Iraq was left with over 1 million casualties and a crushing debt of over $130 billion. The devastating 8-year war with Iran left Iraq's economy in ruins. Facing an enormous debt, Saddam Hussein grew desperate for money and looked for someone to blame for his country's financial troubles. He turned his anger toward his small, oil-rich neighbor to the south, Kuwait. He accused Kuwait of 2 major offenses. First, of driving down global oil prices by producing more than the quotas set by OPEC, which hurt Iraq's ability to recover financially. Second, he claimed that Kuwait was using a technique called slant drilling to steal oil from an Iraqi oil field that straddled their shared border. These accusations created a tense atmosphere in the region. On August 2, 1990, Saddam made another enormous gamble. Believing the world would not intervene, he ordered his massive army to invade and occupy Kuwait. Within hours, the small nation was overrun, and Saddam declared it the 19th province of Iraq. This blatant act of aggression sent shockwaves across the globe and was immediately condemned by the United Nations. The invasion posed a direct threat to the stability of the Middle East and the world's oil supply. The international community, led by the United States under President George H.W. Bush, refused to accept the annexation and began to form a powerful military coalition to confront Iraq. When Saddam refused to withdraw his forces from Kuwait, the United States and its allies launched Operation Desert Storm on January 17, 1991. The military campaign began with a devastating air war that crippled Iraq's command and control systems, followed by a swift and decisive ground assault. After just 100 hours of ground combat, the Iraqi army was completely overwhelmed and Kuwait was liberated. Saddam's powerful military, once one of the largest in the world, was decimated. However, the coalition chose not to invade Iraq and remove Saddam from power, hoping that the defeat would weaken him enough to be overthrown from within. Although he remained in power, Saddam and his country faced severe consequences. The United Nations imposed strict and comprehensive economic sanctions on Iraq, crippling its economy and causing immense hardship for the Iraqi people for over a decade. A UN weapons inspection program, known as UNSCOM, was created and tasked with finding and destroying all of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, including its chemical, biological, and nuclear programs. For the remainder of the 1990s, Iraq was locked in a tense standoff with the international community, with Saddam often playing a cat-and-mouse game with the inspectors, leading to years of suspicion and mistrust. The dynamic between the United States and Iraq shifted dramatically after the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. Although Saddam Hussein had no connection to the 9/11 attacks, the administration of President George W. Bush began to portray him as a grave and imminent threat to global security. The U.S. government argued that Saddam was actively developing weapons of mass destruction and that he could potentially provide them to terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda. This narrative gained momentum, and regime change in Iraq became a central focus of American foreign policy, framed as a necessary step in the broader war on terror. Throughout 2002 and early 2003, the Bush administration made its case for war to the American public and the world. U.S. officials, including Secretary of State Colin Powell in a presentation to the United Nations, presented intelligence that they claimed proved the existence of active Iraqi WMD programs. They argued that years of UN sanctions and weapons inspections had failed and that military action was the only option left to disarm Saddam for good. Despite significant international opposition and skepticism from some allies, the United States built a coalition of the willing and prepared for a full-scale invasion of the country. On March 19, 2003, the United States issued a final ultimatum, giving Saddam Hussein and his sons 48 hours to leave Iraq or face military force. Saddam defiantly refused to go into exile, appearing on Iraqi television to condemn the American demands and rally his people for the coming conflict. His refusal sealed his fate. On the morning of March 20, 2003, the invasion of Iraq began with a series of targeted airstrikes on Baghdad, aimed at killing Saddam and other top leaders. This was followed by a massive ground invasion with U.S. and coalition forces advancing into Iraq from the south. The Iraqi military, already weakened by years of sanctions and the previous Gulf War, offered little effective resistance to the technologically superior coalition forces. Within 3 weeks, American troops had fought their way to the capital. On April 9, 2003, Baghdad fell, symbolized by the iconic televised images of U.S. Marines helping Iraqis pull down a massive statue of Saddam in Firdos Square. As his regime crumbled around him, Saddam Hussein, along with his sons and top aides, vanished. He had escaped the initial bombing and the fall of the capital, becoming a fugitive in the very country he had ruled with an iron fist for nearly a quarter of a century. After the fall of Baghdad, Saddam Hussein was the most wanted man in the world. The United States military launched a massive manhunt to find him, placing him at the top of their most wanted Iraqi playing card deck as the Ace of Spades. For months, Saddam managed to evade capture, moving between various safe houses and relying on a small network of loyal family members and tribe associates to stay hidden. In July 2003, U.S. forces received a tip that led them to a villa in the city of Mosul. In the ensuing raid, Saddam's two sons, Uday and Qusay, were found and killed in a fierce gun battle, a major blow to the former dictator. The search for Saddam himself intensified. U.S. intelligence analysts shifted their focus from high-level officials to the lower-level bodyguards and aides who had been part of his inner circle for years. They believed these individuals were the key to finding his hiding place. This strategy eventually paid off. In December 2003, U.S. forces captured a man who was one of Saddam's personal aides. After intense interrogation, he revealed Saddam's location. The information led them to a remote farmhouse in the area of Ad-Dawr, a town near Saddam's birthplace of Tikrit, a place he knew well. On the evening of December 13, 2003, U.S. Special Forces launched a mission called Operation Red Dawn. They raided the targeted farmhouse and began a thorough search of the area. They soon discovered a concealed entrance to a small underground chamber, barely large enough for one person to lie down in. It was a spider hole. When they opened the cover, they found a disheveled and bearded Saddam Hussein hiding inside. He surrendered without a fight. The man who had once commanded a massive army and lived in opulent palaces was captured in a dirty hole in the ground, a stunning and ignominious end to his time on the run. After his capture, Saddam was held in U.S. custody for months, where he was interrogated by the CIA and FBI. In June 2004, he was formally handed over to the new Iraqi interim government to stand trial for his crimes. The trial focused specifically on the 1982 Dujail massacre, where 148 Shia men and boys were killed in retaliation for a failed assassination attempt against him. Throughout the trial, Saddam remained defiant, often arguing with the judges and claiming he was still the legitimate president of Iraq. On November 5, 2006, the Iraqi High Tribunal found him guilty of crimes against humanity and sentenced him to death by hanging. Saddam Hussein's appeals were quickly rejected, and his death sentence was confirmed. In the early morning hours of December 30, 2006, he was taken to an execution chamber in Baghdad. The execution was carried out by Iraqi officials, though it was filmed, and unofficial footage showing guards taunting him in his final moments was leaked to the public, causing controversy. At the age of 69, the man who had ruled Iraq for 24 years was executed. He was buried the next day in his birthplace of Al-Awya. His death marked the definitive end of one of the most brutal and tumultuous chapters in modern Middle Eastern history. In the aftermath of the invasion and Saddam's removal, the primary justification for the war came under intense scrutiny. Despite extensive searches conducted by inspectors, no stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction were ever found in Iraq. The intelligence that had been presented to the world as proof of active WMD programs was revealed to be flawed and, in some cases, fabricated. This discovery undermined the credibility of the governments that had championed the invasion and fueled a global debate about the war's legitimacy and its true motivations, a debate that continues to this day for many people. The fall of Saddam's regime led to profound and lasting changes in Iraq. It unleashed a wave of sectarian violence between the country's Sunni and Shia communities, which had been brutally suppressed under his rule. This conflict plunged Iraq into a devastating civil war and created a power vacuum that allowed extremist groups, most notably ISIS, to emerge and flourish in the following years. While the Iraqi people were freed from a tyrant, the country was thrust into a new era of instability, violence, and political turmoil that has had far-reaching consequences for the entire region and the world. Another significant outcome of the war was the change in control over Iraq's vast oil reserves. While the oil industry technically remained nationalized under the new Iraqi government, the post-Saddam era saw the return of major Western oil companies. Corporations like BP, Shell, and ExxonMobil signed lucrative contracts to help develop and extract Iraq's oil, operating on a fee-per-barrel basis. The quest for stability, the search for non-existent weapons, and the legacy of a brutal dictator all converged, leaving behind an Iraq that was fundamentally transformed, but not necessarily into the peaceful democratic state that the invasion